In a new age world filled with delusions and wish fulfillment by morons in need of attention, renowned experiencers of high strangeness, and podcasters Jeffrey Ritzman and Jeremy Vaeni received invitations to a tropical paradise getaway called Paratopia. Little did they know, it was the same type of new age spiritual retreat they've been avoiding all their lives.
Oh, don't be shy.
The hybrids are among us now. They're environmentally friendly cars.
Come on, you can shake it. Yeah.
Humanity is at a crossroads. By Eric Clapton.
Anything goes at Paratopia. And welcome.
Hello?
You asleep?
Hello?
It's me, Jer.
I know who it is. Do you have any idea what time it is, dude?
I know. But dude, check it out. I got a letter from Debbie Jordan, the abductee from that Budd Hopkins book.
What, Intruders?
Yeah. And then she wrote that follow-up with her sister called Abducted. The book is called Abducted, not her sister.
Yeah, great story. Are we done here or what?
No. Listen, Jeff, let me read you this letter. We gotta have her on the show. Dear Jeremy, I really like your show Paratopia. In here I think she meant our show, Jeff. I like the track you and Jeff are on with the high strangeness stuff. I know I'm the poster child for
straightforward extraterrestrial abduction narrative, but actually my experiences have been far stranger than what you've read in Intruders.
Wait, Jer, what are you doing? You can't just blend your voice with Deb Jordan's like it's a flashback to when she wrote this. This isn't a movie, you idiot. This is real life. It doesn't work like that.
What do you mean?
Dad, put Jeremy back on the phone.
But I am. It's me, Jeremy.
Are you too high? What are you doing this in a hotel room for?
I'm not, Jeff. It's me, Jeremy.
On what planet would I fall for this shit?
The one where we're in the podcast cave ready to go and you're still on your ass in bed. Now, take off your covers and get over here.
All right, I'm here. What was so important?
Nothing. I just couldn't sleep.
Oh, so you dragged my ass out of bed. What kind of friend are you? Why don't you go bang Debbie Jordan or something? Oh, sorry, Debbie. I didn't see you there.
No, you all got to see a Kool-Aid behind this door.
Yeah, don't fall into that. It's hell getting out.
What makes you think I didn't?
Didn't what?
Bang Debbie Jordan. No, hey, Debbie. Sorry, I didn't see you there.
You're stupid.
Oh, it's nice to meet you, by the way.
Yeah, you too.
So we're all here. You want to do a show? Or
what do you want to talk about?
Well, young Deborah.
Yes.
I've been rereading your book, Abducted, and it's interesting, reading this in light of what we've learned about, for instance, Marley Woods on this show, or DMT tykes, which are, both of which include basketball-sized, sentient beings of some sort or another, and a gibberish that seems to be associated with them. And now, so I'm reading your book Abducted, and right there, pretty much from the beginning, it begins with this basketball-sized light that's out in your yard and seems to affect your dog, right, and the grass, and you, correct?
And my mother, yes.
Tell us, so maybe you can make some sort of sense of this, at least in terms of, assuming that this is even the same thing, at least the same thing as what Ted Phillips describes in Marley Woods. Maybe you can help fill us in on what those effects are, what it actually, at least some of what this thing does.
What the light does?
Yeah.
Well, I can only tell you what it did to me and from my perspective, but what its actual purpose is, I'm not sure. I know in one instance it seems to be a trigger for my mother in order to get me back out into the yard. that night. And then later on, once I was out there, when I started to come out of the garage and was confronted with this ball of light, and apparently, well, I don't know whether the light hit me in the chest or something came from it and hit me in the chest, but totally paralyzed me. And for a minute, I thought I was dead or dying. And then this ball of light seemed to scan me, for lack of a better way to put it. It was about as far up off the ground as I am tall. I'm 5'3", and it slowly went down and then went back up to where it started, and it was probably maybe 20 feet in front of me or so. And I'm not quite sure what it was doing. Like I said, I just got the feeling it was like checking me out. And
but it has radiation effects, correct? And it
yeah,
killed your dog?
Well, it didn't kill her that night. From that point on, she went downhill to the point where I think it was maybe a few weeks later, we ended up having to take her to the vet, and she ended up having to be put down. All of the hair fell off of her body from the neck down, even in places where she couldn't rub. She had a big black spot on her back, and her eyes got all white, and her teeth started falling out, her gums started bleeding. She just fell apart. And the vet had to put her to sleep. Of course, the mark in the yard showed up that weekend and basically was apparent in some form or another for several years. And snow would melt off of it every year. When we'd have a light, dusting of snow, it would immediately melt off of this mark. And animals walked around it, plant life, nothing grew on it for over a year. And then when it finally did start to grow in, the grass that came in from the outer edges of it was a much thicker and almost a purpley green color. I got sick. I stayed sick for practically a year. The next day is when it started. Actually that night, I started feeling kind of nauseated, and my vision started acting weird, like halos around lights, kind of like you get when you dunk your head in the swimming pool and open your eyes too much and you get a little dose of chlorine, Mm-hmm. But it was, I hadn't gotten my eyes in the chlorine in the pool. But anyway, the next morning when I woke up, my eyes were swollen shut, and I was in terrific pain. My mother took me to the emergency room. The doctor who saw me in the emergency room, one of the doctors in there happened to be an eye doctor, and they actually transported me from the emergency room to his office across the street because he had all of his stuff there. And I do recall him asking me if I had looked into the arc of a welder's torch, which I said no, asking me if I had looked into an eclipse, and I'm like, dude, do I look retarded? No, and I was just, please help me. I'm miserable. I can't stand this. It was like my eyes were on fire. Several creams and several weeks later finally healed up, and they have never been right since. I became extremely farsighted, and now, at the age of 40, I was discovered to have, I think they call it drusen or something like that around the optic nerve of one eye, and pressures were a little higher than they should be. So I've had some issues from my eyes ever since then, as well as my vision, and sometimes, for no reason at all, they'll just get real red and burn and water like crazy for 5 or 10 minutes, and then it stops. And that's happened ever since that night. I also developed life-threatening allergies that I had never had before. I'd get rashes out of the blue. I'd run fevers. The glands in my neck would swell up. The fingernails and toenails, my fingernails and toenails for years grew out with horizontal wavy lines on them, and then they got real thin like paper. My hair got real thin. I was sick for a long, long time. It took many years for me to get my strength back and get my health back. It really knocked me for a loop, physically and psychologically.
Well, thank God for Space Brothers.
Yeah, they really...
did you have any sense that the ball of light was alive or a tool of some sort? Any feeling about the light itself?
Well, like I said, I got the feeling that this thing was eyeballing me. Now, whether it had its own life to it or whether it was a tool of some kind or not. At the same time, though, I did recall seeing several small people out in the yard, for lack of a better term, child size, 6 of them, as a matter of fact, and they all were scattered about in different areas of the yard. And about the time I saw this white ball of light about basketball size, they started to all move together and come towards this smaller. Like I said, this craft, I could see it off to my left, and it was one of those kind of deals where I knew it was there. I was almost too terrified to really want to even look at it, but yet didn't want to take one eye off of it because I wanted to know where it was in relationship to me at all times. You know what I mean? That kind of terror. And but these small people all moved into this, or to the direction of this small egg-shaped craft. And I don't know how they all got in there. I don't even know if it was a craft. It was shaped like an egg, and it really wasn't much bigger than the pump house of the swimming pool. Probably, I don't know, a typical pump house size. I mean, it wasn't very big. So, in my mind, I can't think that they all hopped in this thing and flew away. I'm not quite sure exactly what that thing was, but it was there in the yard. It didn't really quite touch the ground because I felt I had a sense of it kind of bobbing a little bit, like a bobber on the surface of the water. But
like an alien clown car.
A clown car, yeah. I didn't hear any Kathie music though.
Well, you actually were nice enough to. I'd posted on the forum a dream, and I wrote to you and said, "Hey, take a look at this," just because part of the message of it I thought was kind of striking, and you were nice enough to sort of dissect it a little bit, and also wrote pretty lengthy, saying, thank God for Budd Hopkins. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here. But pretty much everything I've said about him is true in terms of him not accepting high strangeness, and that this is far less straightforward than the narrative that comes out of his books, which include you in them. So I find that interesting. Can you tell us what has happened to you that Budd would not include or has not included in his book? What sort of high strangeness stuff are we talking about?
Well, high strangeness in that it seemed as if later on my experiences took on a different dimension, and one not so much physical, but more spiritual and psychological and mind-expanding in a way, I guess. I love Budd to death, and he has helped untold amount of people. And like I said in my letter to you, I will always thank him for saving my life. But he has always been, and I've heard it said before, I wasn't one that coined this, but in the emergency room of this whole phenomenon, when I was a broken piece of work that could barely function, and he stabilized me like an emergency room doctor. But there's only one of him, and there's thousands of me, and but he did have other people. He introduced other people in my life for support, and I'll tell you what, the baby stuff. When I first, when I approached him with this, and I think I pretty much blew his mind. I blew my own mind because I couldn't understand why I was even saying anything to him about it. What connection there could possibly be with all of this, extraterrestrial stuff. And still, I don't know for sure. I know what I remember, but I also realize what the human mind is capable of. in the face of trauma. And so I almost kind of, I always question even my own memories to a certain point because, you know, I mean, when my late husband killed himself, I ran around and told everybody that the angels put their hands over my ears and I didn't hear the gunshot wound, even though I did, but I didn't remember it for 3 months. Your brain does something to protect you. So I know some of this trauma that I have dealt with, you know, now that I'm 25 years from it, it's become clearer for me. But Budd,
what was the?
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, what was the baby stuff that you were referring to?
Well, we even debated about whether it was going to be in Intruders or not because it was so way out there in left field. And I think that as Budd got deeper into the investigation with my family and started to get more people coming to him, he started to see that there were other women were reporting the same thing. And I didn't know these women. I was a little girl in the middle of the Indiana cornfields. I didn't have any exposure to any of this sort of thing. And so how these other women could be telling the same story that I'm telling, you know, that's a big red flag that there's something going on here. And I think Budd decided that it was important. And it was really hard for me to agree to put that in the book because it's one thing to say, yeah, I saw a UFO. No, you know, no one cares about that. But when you start saying, you know, I think I know I was pregnant and then my baby disappeared and I don't know that it might not be connected with one of these experiences I had, you know. Then you start looking at the person and going, okay, let me scoot a little closer to the door and make sure that lock is not down. But actually what happened was one time we were, he had come to the house. He'd come to Indiana. He came several times during his 3 years. He investigated, you know, researched this my whole family and our life. And we had gone to talk to somebody else in Greenfield about another possible abduction out there around the same time that all the stuff was happening here. And when we pulled back into my mom and dad's driveway, I had been thinking about this pregnancy I had when I was when I first got engaged to my first husband. We and the whole circumstances of the whole thing was strange, and I ended up not being pregnant. I was pregnant. It was confirmed by a doctor, because like I've always said, you don't have a daddy like mine, and you don't go telling him that you're pregnant until you're sure, because you don't want to deal with that, especially when you're 17. So, but I had told my mom about it. She'd taken me to the doctor. They'd given me a urine test and the pelvic and all that and said, yeah, you're pregnant. There was even some question as to when I got pregnant. Well, so I knew how to get pregnant, and I knew I only had done that one time. So I knew when I got pregnant, but they thought I was a little farther along maybe. But anyway, then I was babysitting for my sister, the one that wrote the other book with me, one night. I even remember what was on TV. This is how it stuck in my mind, how important it must have been. I was laying on her couch, the front door was open, all the kids were in bed, and I was watching the Bob Newhart show on TV. And I remember turning my back to the TV and feeling really tired all of a sudden. And then I felt someone stroke my back of my neck and down my spine, and it startled me, but then I just immediately fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning, I was in my niece's bed, and she was like 2 or 3. She was little. And I didn't remember how I got there, and I didn't remember my sister and her husband coming in, and I didn't. But when I woke up, the first thing I thought was, I'm not pregnant. And I was hysterical. I didn't feel any problem, but I went to the bathroom to check, and I couldn't shake it. And it just ate at me all day. And my girlfriend was going to go to Planned Parenthood to get her birth control pills, and I had told her. And she, how I was feeling. And she said, "Well, come with me. You can get a pregnancy test. Don't tell them you already know you're pregnant and everything. They'll give it to you. It don't cost nothing, or maybe it was $5. I can't even remember." And so I went and had the pregnancy test, and I remember the lady coming out to me, and she said, "Well, you're not pregnant, and if you don't have your period in the next week, then you need to see your family doctor." And when I heard that you're not pregnant, I just kind of went into shock. By the time my girlfriend got me in the car, I was sobbing. I was hysterical. So I decided to go home and tell my mom there was something wrong, and I needed to go to the doctor. And so she took me back to the doctor, and, I was not pregnant. There wasn't anything there. My mom asked him, does she need a D&C? What does she have? She had a miscarriage or something. And he said, no, she doesn't. I didn't need a D&C. And the thing that stuck in my mind with him is he said to me, "You're young. You'll have other children. If I were you, I would just forget this ever happened and just go on." And I thought to myself, and this was back in the 70s, and I was basically a kid, and I thought, I'm never going to forget this. I'm never going to forget this. And I never did. And I thought about it for years, but then I didn't after a while. But then after that Mark in the Yard incident happened, that was like something happened that night, and a part of me or who I was died, and somebody new was born. And everything about my life changed in that moment from that point on. And from that point on, I started thinking about that baby and about how strange it was, the whole circumstances surrounding that pregnancy, and I could not shake it. And finally, it was so strong that I finally said something to Budd about it, and I'll never forget the look on his face, because he was like mortified, I think. He was like, "Oh my God, she is crazy." Then I started crying. I said, "I don't know why I'm telling you this." That's the whole baby thing. And I never knew. I've had so much strangeness in my life. I assumed that everyone did. I didn't have any idea that no, everyone doesn't.
When you say that it had a transformative effect, spiritually, mentally, at what points in your life did those happen, and what were they?
It started to happen pretty quickly once we really started to uncover the past. And I had one hypnosis session with Dr. Clamar in New York. Then I had a few with Budd. But during the hypnosis sessions, during the actual sessions, I really didn't remember too much more than I had already remembered consciously. But what happened was, it was like later, after I'd had the session, then little things would start to come flying back out of the blue. Something would just pop in my mind, and I'd think, "Oh my God, I can't believe I forgot that." It was like it pulled the plug out of the floodgate. And as this new awareness and all these memories came back to me, I think that's when I started to metamorphosize into this creature that, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't change it for the world. I've had people ask me, if you could have stopped all this and, knew what you knew, would you? And I'm like, no, because it's a part of me, and it's made me who I am, and I have been able to grow like this, in this way, because of it. I don't know whether it caused me to be this way, or it forced me to do it myself. You know what I'm saying?
Well, what way are you? What way are you that's different?
I am so, I don't know, empathic. I don't just listen to people when they talk about feelings and things. I feel what they say. I don't know how to describe it. It's like I almost become one with that person. I get into their head, and I can feel somebody out in a couple of minutes. And I don't know if it's just my instinct or if it's something extra. I don't know. But I can feel your energy. Everyone has a different energy footprint, and it's like a fingerprint. No two are alike. And if somebody comes up behind me that I don't know, I know there's someone there, but I don't know who they are. But if somebody comes up behind me that I do know, and I don't see them, I know pretty much I can tell you who they are because I can feel how they feel in my space. You know what I mean? And that sounds weird. But that's stuff that started happening after June 30th, 1983.
It actually sounds great. It sounds testable.
It's testable, yes. And
maybe you could win the James Randi money.
Who?
Yeah. Don't bet on
James
Yeah,
Randi, the arch skeptic who offers $1 million for anyone who can prove their psychic or other abilities.
Well, I know one time I was at a researcher's house in Missouri, and he had a bunch of people there, and he had a guy there who was some kind of scientist who had made this experiment with a compass and had a meter on it and stuff, and he had people waving their hands over to see what they could do. I was feeling really on that night, and, I'm not really good at controlling this. It comes and goes in fleeting moments, just like when I was, it seems like the more emotionally charged I am, the stronger it is. I was mad at my mom one time, and I was mad at my sister, and I was cleaning the brass handles on their cabinets. My sister had taken them off and had me polishing them, and I bent them up in my hands. And these are solid brass, but I didn't realize I was doing it. I was just mad at my sister. But I remember that guy had that test, and I waved my hand over it, and the dial started to spin crazy. And I said, "Look at that." And the guy was so freaked out by it that he put the thing away, and nobody messed with for the rest of the night. So, I mean, maybe there is some stuff with me that could be testable, I don't know. I'm sure you know what remote viewing is. I started learning about stuff like this because I had even an experience when I was a child of kind of leaving myself and going somewhere else. And I started practicing that, and I didn't do too bad. All these things started to develop in me after June 30th, 1983. I'm not saying it wasn't already there, but I think it was asleep or dormant. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's like somebody flipped the switch on.
Well, Deb, one of the things that I'm hearing from you is the empathy part of it, and I'm not sure how much of Dennis McKenna's stuff that you've actually listened to or Terrence McKenna's stuff. But one of the things that he talks about, like in depth about, is the aspect of seeing these beings, which are described as made of light about the size of a basketball, and they come bouncing up to you and they vibrate in place, then they jump into your chest, which sounds very similar to what you described at the beginning of the show.
Yeah, I felt like I was hit by lightning.
Yeah. And one of the things that he says that they're doing in that experience is that they are teaching a new dispensation of language that is visual, in the sense that, he says one of the most uncomfortable things that you could ever do in a conversation is say to someone, "Can you explain to me what I just said?" Because it kind of unveils the fact that nobody listens to anybody anyway, and even when they do, they don't get it. Whereas you're saying that you feel things that other people feel as they're describing a situation or telling you a story or whatever. How much of that do you feel is visual, in that you're actually reading or hearing their language, but you're reading the inflection and seeing the inflection? In other words, you were somehow taught or given that that ability to visualize language.
Yes, absolutely. And it's like I listen with my whole being, and I hear more than just what you say. I feel what you say. I see what you say. I smell what you say. You know what I'm saying? I listen with all of my senses, not just my ears. And I get a whole picture. I hear what you say, but I also hear what you're thinking when you say it. Sometimes what you think and what you say aren't the same thing. And I'm getting it all. You know what I'm saying?
Right. How much of that translates to you from reading, like written word? Does any of that kind of come through in that at all?
It depends on who wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
And I can, well, maybe not, because I have read letters that were written 200 years ago by someone, and I still feel as if I'm in the room with them. Mm-hmm. And you know what I'm saying? It's really, it's hard to verbalize, and I have often said, I wish I could just get into you and make you know, because mm-hmm. that's the easiest way. But I can't do that because you can't do that yet. But mm-hmm. you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's something that he talks about ad nauseum, is how indescribable some of these events and feelings are. There
are no words. Yes, yeah. we don't have words to describe the things that I know and see and feel. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of stuff that I think researchers like Budd kind of shy away from, because it does sound crazy. And I realize that if I wasn't experiencing this myself, I may not be able to grasp this concept. Mm-hmm. But it is a part of me now. Do
you think that? I mean, you said that over time your experience sort of changed from the onset of what it was to you versus present day, if that still is going on with you. Do you attribute these things that have picked up over the years by virtue of interaction with this enigma? Do you attribute the I guess you could call it a greater perception to what the experience is versus what it used to be for you?
Well, for me in the beginning, the experiences were more three-dimensional and physical in this plane, you know what I mean? And obviously I had the symptoms, the physical problems, the physical marks in the yard, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But then later on, it became the interaction that I started to have became more psychic, for lack of a better way to put it. Mm-hmm. In the mind sort of thing, not so much in the physical. And honestly, I don't know whether what I have dealt with has been, extraterrestrial or another dimension. Something in my brain opened up, and I have had these wild and crazy, vivid thoughts, like almost like quantum physics guys I see on TV. When I see them talk about that, they think that maybe there's an indefinite amount of universes that all exist together at the same time. I'm like, yes. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't able. I've never heard anybody else say it, but I would visualize this existence as just like another layer of the onion. Everything is just right here. There are things that exist right with you, but something in your mind can't see it or can comprehend it yet, but it doesn't mean it's not there. And then yet there are some people, maybe like me sometimes, that can access that part of their brain that can sometimes see that, Right. I said I started to be able to see dead people. I know that sounds crazy too, believe me, but
No, it goes with the territory.
Okay, you know those stereo optic pictures that when you first look at them, they just look like a bunch of colored dots.
Mm-hmm.
But if you focus on that in a certain way, and you don't really quite know exactly when that point is, but all of a sudden you hit just the right sweet spot and it just pops out at you in 3D.
Sure.
That's how I see things.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I've talked to Jeremy. I've talked his ear off about this part of it that has been pretty common for me to see, to kind of look at a white wall and kind of, you're almost focusing in between you're focusing on the air between the wall and you.
Right.
And you start to see like what looks like really fine static grain to what you're looking at, and you see things moving in that.
And I've seen doorways, the shadow of a window or a doorway in a room that isn't there.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is all the thing. This is June the 30th, 1983, when that girl died, and that's when I came. That's when I was born. I mean, that's when this all started. And in the beginning, it was so intense and overwhelming that it crippled me for a year, mentally and physically, But I survived it, and I'm slowly sorting out what I was left with, and I know it sounds kind of strange, but believe me, I've been tested. I even kind of hoped they'd tell me I was crazy so I could just take a pill and it'll all go away and I could be like everyone else. But that's not going to happen.
No.
Well, I want to get back to the hybrid thing for just one moment, because I want to know how literal you think that is now. Do you think that they really did take a pregnancy? Did you ever meet this supposed child? I can't remember from Intruders if something tells me that you had held a baby and that sort of stuff. Was that you?
Yeah.
Okay, so do you think that that's, looking back at that now, well, do you have a follow-up on that? I mean, is the baby an adult now? I mean, do you still see it?
Well, she'd be 30 years old now. And, because, yes, I'm quite ancient. Although, you know what? I look pretty good for an old broad. I think they're keeping me young. But anyway, I was definitely pregnant. There was no question about that. It was confirmed. I have the medical records. There wasn't any doubt about that. The fogginess and the question comes with what happened to the pregnancy. I call them dreams because, I got to live here, and that's how I can deal with it. That's how I can make it fit into my world. These dreams / memory that I have of seeing this child and realizing that it's mine, and then being told by the others that it's not completely mine, and being very upset, and being told that I would see her again someday. And then many years later, this is also, a real and waking moment here. I wasn't dreaming or asleep when this happened. I was sitting in a kitchen in my apartment, and I had a patio with one of those privacy fences around it, and little slats you can see through it. And at one point, I just felt that someone were watching me, and I looked up, and I saw, in between the slats, a girl, all dressed in black, but, maybe the size of a 9-year-old or an 8-year-old. And, what kind of weirdo 9-year-old or 8-year-old parent would dress their kid all in black, you know what I mean? From boots up. But the hair was white, and I could see the eye. I could see her one eye peering at me between the slat, and she was looking at me. And it was almost as if she jumped through the fence and smacked my psyche in some way, and I'm like, it took my breath away, and I jumped out of the chair to run out that side to go to her, and she was gone. And immediately I felt, out of the blue, that was her. And, you know, I don't know how it is about hybrids, but I know that children, when they're separated from their parents, when they get older, you know, adoptees, they look for their real parents. They want to know. They feel that pull. Well, this girl has got me in her, and I would hope she would be curious about me. You know, like I said, now she'd be 30 years old, over 30 years old. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. Maybe someday I'll see her again. Let me ask you something, Jeff. Do you ever do this? Do you ever, like if you're in a big mall where there's a lot of people around you, you know, do you walk past someone and turn around because something about them, their energy pulls at you, and you turn around and look at them? Did you ever wonder who that really was? Who is walking around among us? You know?
Well,
no? Okay. Just wondered.
No. I can't. I have a hard time being around large crowds. I get. I don't get nervous. It's not that kind of feeling. I just get a. And I get it even at the mall sometimes. Almost like I'm. Almost like you're riding in a car with somebody and they can't pick a station.
Very noisy, and it's not just the chatter. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's just it's like I'm just, my head just gets really clouded with a lot of different stuff. But what you're talking about as far as people that you see around, there's been people that, you know, I can remember this as far back as being a little kid, where I would be at a restaurant with my mom and dad, and I'd kind of look over and there'd be somebody staring at me from like clean across the room, and I'd think nothing of it other than, you know, a casual glance, eyes meet, and, you know, that happens. And then I you know, take a drink of water and I look back over and they're still staring. And I sit there, you know, I would tell my friends about this stuff, and I'd say, you know, I can't figure out if there's something weird about them or they just can't figure my ugly ass out. So it was always just kind of this, and I have that a lot. I don't know that I attributed that to anything with this. Although I'm sure if I talked to Timothy Good, he would try to, you know, or he would have that kind of outlook that, you know, perhaps if you had thought something in that direction, maybe something would have happened. But I don't necessarily always ascribe to. I'm kind of on the fence on that kind of thing of whether they're walking around. I think they're always around. I think it's all a matter of perception when it comes to what you see. I mean, in other words, with your perceived daughter that you saw out on your deck, I mean, the real obvious question there, and I know you can't answer this because nobody really can, is if I or Jeremy were standing there with you and that happened and we were just a fly on the wall, would we have seen her? That's the real question to me. In the sense that I don't believe a lot of the imagery that comes out of abduction reports as being the totality of what's going on. I see, and I've kind of railed on Budd and on Dave Jacobs and people like that, because I think that based on what comes out of certain hypnosis sessions, I think that the you know what I mean when I say the top level experience. I think you probably get what I mean by that. That they're taking that top level experience and kind of taking that as the total experience. And I think that's the misleading part, and that's the reason that our outlook or our stance on what the alien experience is so warped and twisted for people who don't have it. For the public in general, they think it's all about hybrids and sperm and ovum samples and all that kind of stuff, when really it's so much deeper than that. And so much more complex than that, that probably is some sort of reactionary perception by us that may have nothing to do with the real reality of what's going on. If we can even say that, there may be different levels to that. So that's kind of like where I come from with this stuff, is that I recognize that it's a hell of a lot more than what we've ever been told about in certain books and by certain authors and researchers, is that it's much bigger than that. But unfortunately, people will fight you on that because they just don't seem to get it. And it's hard to verbalize,
the people
like
I was just going to say, the people that don't get it usually are afraid. They don't want to get it. They don't want to get it.
Well,
They're not ready. They haven't reached that point yet.
I think like you say, what Budd kind of helps people do to a certain extent is to integrate the experience. And once people have integrated that experience, it's hard to go back and say, okay, there's more. And it's decidedly uncomfortable that we have to actually think that these things are, a breath away every second of every day. I don't think that's that's not a comfortable thing for a lot of people to accept that.
And it screws around with their whole way of life, their whole belief system. It's really, I don't know. There's a lot of people walking around today that could never accept or understand this because they wouldn't allow themselves to. Because so that's kind of like what I feel like my whole destiny in this existence here is about, is trying to find those people and trying to help them feel comfortable and show them the way and teach them to come along. You know what I mean? Because I feel like if I've raised one person up, I've raised everybody, including myself, up to this higher level that we all need to be going towards,
I mean, I have to wonder if the purpose in the contact, if that's what it is, if that's not the purpose, is to just make the obvious bigger awareness picture more evident to other people.
Everybody, because we are all connected. We are all a part of each other. I mean, as far this is how I feel. We are all a part of each other. We're all part of one life. And, some of us can't grow unless all of us do.
I can kind of see that. To a certain point, I can kind of see that. I think, for me right now, and it may change in another year or so because it often has, but I kind of see this as more or less like a wake-up call to a greater version of reality. And what we think a lot of times is let's get up, let's get breakfast, let's go to work, let's do our job, come home, order a pizza, watch Lost, and go to bed. I mean, I've said since the time I was a little kid, because I saw how my dad worked, 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. every night. And I'm like, is that all it is? That's what, that's what adulthood is you just do this, and this is what you do until you die. And there was always and of course my mom thought, you're just a weird little kid, for thinking stuff like that. But I always had an inkling that there was something much more complicated about life, and that there are other things in play rather than, what people see in the 9 to 5. And when you mention all the weird stuff that had been floating around all your life, and thinking that that's the way it is, that's what everybody has. That's exactly the way I felt as an elementary school student. I just remember having a pretty high level experience one night and trying to talk to a couple of my friends about it. They're like, "What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. You talking about a dream you had?" I'm like, yeah, that's it. It was a dream. And, and I just assumed that this was everybody. And I certainly, and I don't know how you felt about it, but I know that I was kind of drawn to the UFO thing for a completely different reason. And I thought people who claimed the abduction experience were just completely full of shit. I thought this is just another way to gain more attention. One guy takes a photo, the next guy claims he's been on the ship. So it's like a one-upmanship type thing. Mm-hmm. And that was until, I had an experience that a researcher, which ended up being my research partner, told me, you need to sit down and write everything strange that you can remember happening to you. Write it all down and let's go through it and see what we got. And I had told my wife about some weird experiences when I was a little kid, long before I ever got involved in ufology at all. Mm-hmm. And that was when I was like, ugh, you got to be kidding me, right? I'm one of those people. That's what I am. That's what that was. It just I didn't want it to be that. Oh, yeah. And then, of course, you talk about floodgates. I'm all too familiar with floodgates. And that was when all of this stuff started to start manifesting in like really in your face kind of ways, stuff that you couldn't blow off. Right. And stuff that other people see. So it's not all in your head.
I was in denial for years. I mean, once I got past that point with Budd where I could start to function again in life, I mean, I withdrew from everybody. Anybody that had anything to do with UFO stuff, researchers, I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just wanted to be normal, and I wanted to raise my kids and have a life. But you know what? In those years, I had a lot of time to think, and I began to realize things were still happening, little things that the universe was telling me, this is your destiny. This is where you belong, and you will be here whether you like it or not. And, because I told Jeremy sometime during a conversation we had, I didn't square out looking for this. It came and got me and drugged me into it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I can kind of see that same kind of pattern. I mean, what as far as verbiage have you gotten from these beings that you have found to be useful, or has it just been, I mean, for me, it's been a lot of very cryptic stuff that I still don't understand what it means. I mean, how much of that do you get, and then how much of it do you get that you actually find like there's something useful that was said or communicated that, that you can talk about?
Well, first, I think I've had interaction with more than one type of phenomenon. And, I mean, I think there's as many different things going on as there are races of people on this planet, and they all have different agendas too. I've had some strange stuff happen. I did it for about a year. I always said it was like my brain threw up. I would start having these thoughts and feelings, and if I didn't write them down, I couldn't do anything else until I wrote them down or got them out. I drew a bunch of designs for 1 year, and it's funny because several of those have have, like 10 years later, showed up as crop circles in England. The same exact design, which is kind of strange. And I've talked to Colin Andrews about that. He's aware of that. He was aware of it back in '89. But some of it is like it's more. I've got a feeling, and I don't know that anybody actually told me this or not, because a lot of the communication that I had with this phenomenon or entity or whatever you want to call them wasn't so much words, but it was a transference of ideas and thoughts. I was given these ideas, these images, but I had to use what I had available to me in my mind to understand it. You know what I mean? I had to put the images to these thoughts that came to me. It wasn't like someone talked to me that much. It was like, you know how I say I want to get inside of you and make you know what I know? It was kind of like that. It was like they got inside of me, and I just became a part of them, and then I knew. You know what I'm saying? I know that sounds just insane. I don't have any words to describe some of this quote-unquote communication that I had. I feel that the human race is about to, they go one of two ways, and it's our free will, our choices to which way it'll go. We'll either become extinct, or we're going to go take another big jump on the evolutionary ladder.
Ah, who does that sound like, Jeff?
You're in for one very big surprise. One very big surprise.
What?
Go on.
What? What?
Yeah, it sounds like me. It sounds like Whitley Strieber, you know.
Oh, yeah, well, hey. What did I tell you, Vaeni? We're two peas in a pod. Doesn't that scare the hell out of you? Anyways, yeah, that's what I feel. And I feel as if I have some kind of duty, or my destiny is to help that free choice choose the evolution rather than the extinction.
Well, wait a second. Let's go back for a second, because you said that there were different beings or intelligences that were working with you here. So is there a difference in what they're telling you, or is there a difference in anything other than perhaps visually or physically?
The only differences that I've gotten are that some are perhaps not so nice. I wasn't kidding when I said there's a fight going on somewhere over us, that there may be other forces in the universe or in other universes that may not really either care too much or not really want us to, you know, move forward for whatever reasons, which, you know, being a human being, I probably couldn't even fathom some of it anyway. But I have had interaction with what they call the Nordic type a couple of times, and then, of course, the little gray guys with the big black eyes. Then I had a strange kind of interaction with a thing that was built like a gray, but it was all blue and kind of stepped through an invisible doorway. I don't even really think he even knew that I could see him. I'm thinking that was some kind of interdimensional thing or something. Like I happened to just pop in there and see that. It really wasn't meant for me to see, but I did. And I've had experience with one kind of thing that was not very pleasant, who was threatening and scared me and was hideous, you know. And, you know, I've been involved in the paranormal side of it, the ghost hunting stuff. I'm really feeling that there is some connection between all things paranormal.
Yeah, join the club. Yeah.
Seriously, UFOs, ghosts, all that crap. There's some connection. There's some common denominator with all of this in this great, giant, bigger picture here.
Well, how about this? How about that UFOs and aliens and ghosts are all a symptom of something much bigger?
Well, yeah. Yeah. I get that.
You know, that's That's what I was told a long time ago, that excuse me, that all of this stuff is just a symptom of a much bigger issue. And I'm still trying to figure out what that bigger issue is.
Well, what was the creature that was threatening and all of that? How did that go down? What did that thing look like, and how was it threatening you?
Well,
and why?
I don't know why. I was living in my apartment. I just moved out of my parents and my kids, and I had gotten an apartment, and I was still, I think, sleeping on a cot or had just gotten to bed. It's been a long time ago, but it's been over 20 years ago, but boy, it scared the shit out of me. And I had never forgotten that horrible face. But he looked more human than not, but yet there was something distinctly alien about his face. His eyes were crazy, and his teeth were sharp and jaggedy, and he came running in my bedroom. I had heard the patio door rattling, and I had heard the rocking chair moving in the kids' living room, and I was awake. I tried to look and see if I could see someone, and then he burst in the room, and he was screaming and yelling at me, and I couldn't even understand what he was saying. But he kept darting at me like he was going to hit me, and he had a stick in his hand. And I'm like, what the fuck? You know, what is going on? I mean, I was hysterical.
Sounds like Dee Snider from Twisted Sister to me. I mean,
what the fuck are you doing in my room? What the hell? I remember I scooted up against the wall, and I pulled the covers up around me, and I'm like, I was trying to shield him from hitting at me. And I can't remember how it ended. Something happened, and he stopped. He started looking real frightened, and I didn't do anything. But it was like there was some unseen thing that chased him away from me. You know what I'm saying? And that's basically how I remember it ending. Something else that I couldn't see protected me from him. You know what I'm saying? I had this feeling for the better part of my life that I have been protected, that I'm being protected, that I'm being guarded. And my sister Kathie also has this feeling and has been told, as well as I have been told, by someone at one point or another in our life, that if we ever got any life-threatening illness or something, like all we needed to do was go out into a field somewhere alone, remote, lay down and go to sleep. Which I've never done that. I've never tried it. And, she had a stroke, and I don't think she went out and laid in the yard after she had her stroke or anything. But we always kind of felt like we were protected. So, I mean, in a way, it's been, I guess, kind of good because I've had some terrifying and scary shit happen to me and memories, but I somehow feel as though it's all okay and that I'll be all right.
I wish, are there any specifics? Because do you not find it odd that you feel like you've gotten these communications or, and even though the means of communication is something that is really hard to verbalize, I would think that whatever was said you could verbalize. Do you find it odd that you're finding it hard to verbalize what was said?
No.
Because I think it's like, we've been talking about this just on the discussion board, about experiencers feeling as though, just like you said, that we've got to come forward and start talking about this stuff and build awareness and all of that. But none of us can seem to actually get a grasp on why that is. So it seems like there's this vague feeling, but nothing real behind it. And I'm just wondering, is there something real behind it for you? Is there?
To me, we're all a little piece of the puzzle, and every time that I get connected with another person who is like me, for lack of a better way to put it, I get extremely excited because we learn from each other and we grow somehow in our experiences and sharing with each other. So we're all each a little piece of the puzzle. And the more people that I, come in contact with, the more clearer I feel about, my purpose in all this. And and I do remember having been told somehow by someone that some answers are in my blood. And I told Budd this 20 years ago. Somebody needs to look at our blood because there's something different in our blood. I don't know what that means. I also remember being told somehow that light was going to be used for healing and medical purposes and travel and all kinds of communications. And, this was 20 years ago. There are several things that I actually wrote down that I think are in the book that my sister and I wrote, because I kept a journal of stuff. Remember how you said that you should sit down and write down everything weird and all the weird stuff that you can remember? That's what I did. That's what ended up being that second book. But as far as, like I said, I mean, I think that I need to be, if I say one thing or one word that flips that switch in somebody else that gets them started on this journey, then I've done what I'm supposed to do. The journey being some kind of evolution or some kind of growth, some kind of spiritual, psychic growth. I mean, this is way bigger than a mark in a yard or a poke in the leg. Yeah,
that's what I find fascinating about you, is that you are somebody who has had those surface level or top level, as Jeff says, experiences, but you don't, in the long run, cling to them. Like you had told me that since your hysterectomy, you haven't had any blatant abductions, and you feel like almost abandoned in some way, but in another way, that it's more. It's not about that.
Right. It's not about that.
I think the average person reading an abduction book would end it there. Would read, I had a hysterectomy, and these aliens lost all interest in me. Therefore, these are aliens, and they're little doctors, and they're doing an experiment. And when you're no longer a valuable guinea pig for them, they toss you by the wayside. You, having had that experience, don't actually see it that way, do you?
No, I don't. It was like I graduated to a different level at that point. And like I said, I don't really have a lot of real-time odd things happen or a lot of sightings. I have had some sightings, some CE1s. I was involved in that Kokomo boom thing last year. I was a witness to that craziness. And we've had some odd things happen around the house, and the family has too, but not to the magnitude of June 30th, 1983, or the few episodes before that. And that's what I'm saying. Whatever was done to me during those times, I think, was to facilitate this later on in some way. And it changed the experience, the abduction experience changed from the physical part of it is no longer needed, for lack of a better way to put that, even.
Have you talked to Bud about this?
You know what? I've talked to Bud very little over the years. Because like I said, for about 10 good years, I pulled away. I focused on other things in my life, and I tried to make this stop, that it wasn't going to have any of that. And Bud's very busy man. He's got thousands and thousands of people grabbing at him and needing him, And I've seen him a few times over the years, and we've always been warm, but we've never really talked about any of this. It's always been, how's the family, and you know what I mean, just superficial stuff. And then, of course, when I found out about the eye thing, the macular stuff at 40, which is rare, and the the scar in my eardrum and physical things like that pop up, and the little bright spot in my CAT scan. I try to let him know about weird shit like that. But
just as an aside, I think it's really hilarious that you did UFO Hunters for that Indiana boom thing.
Didn't tell them who I was.
But you didn't tell them who you were, so they didn't make the connection.
Well, you know what? Because it wasn't about me, and it wasn't about all the shit that I've been through. This was about the Kokomo people, the boom, the thing that happened in Kokomo. There's a lot of stuff going on here, and there's still stuff going on here. And I didn't want to, I didn't want to distract them from what I thought was important. So, yeah, they didn't. I think maybe Bill knows now that he's my Facebook buddy, but now it wasn't about me. Other than I was just a witness, and now I'm an investigator. I investigate again for MUFON. I did that 15 years ago and kind of backed away from it, but then after the whole Kokomo thing blew up, Jerry's like, "Can you please help us?" I'm like, "Okay."
Do you have any feeling on Robert Bigelow basically buying MUFON?
That upsets me. Yeah, I do have some feelings about it. I mean, I'm not comfortable with that. I don't know Bob Bigelow. I've never met him. He might be a perfectly nice guy, but several years ago, I was told, and I could be mistaken, but I was told that he sold some of his files to Bob Bigelow many years ago, and one of those was mine, because I had worked with him on a project that him and another researcher in St. Louis were working on as far as abductees go at the time, from a psychological point of view, him being a psychologist. But, so I've known for years that Bob Bigelow had purchased a file of me and some of my stuff that was kind of, stuff I maybe might not want some strange guy having. But he's got it, and I never could. I don't know. I don't understand why he would want something like that. And so then when this happens, the first thing I'm thinking is he's going to suck up anybody else that has an experience, kind of an abduction or something. He's going to get a hold of all their stuff. What does he want all this stuff for? I'm probably just being paranoid, and I may be completely wrong, and I don't want to judge anybody, and I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, and I MUFON, it could be a great thing for them money-wise, and help boost them up in the mainstream, but I feel uncomfortable with it, and I can't lie about that. I'm not going to. So if I get kicked out, I get kicked out. Oh, well. Well, what do you think about it?
I don't know. I mean, I only know about him peripherally. I know
he's certainly an interesting guy. I'd like to meet him. Maybe I'd feel better if I met him.
Well, I know he's a pretty scary guy.
Huh?
From what I hear, he's a pretty kind of a shady character. And, essentially he was trying to build a ship on UFO, whatever he could glean off of UFO data.
Why? What's he going to do with it?
Well, I don't know. Because he can, because he's a billionaire and he's probably bored. And I know, Skinwalker Ranch, he certainly hasn't released any of the data and video and whatever on that. Right, Jeff? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. However, I will say for the record, Mr. Bigelow, if you'd like to in any way support the show with a grant, Jeremy and I would be most appreciative. Thank you.
Yeah,
don't get me wrong.
Mr. Bigelow,
I think you're shady and you may have killed people for less, but I will sell out to you immediately. I mean, don't get us wrong on that.
I'm an experiencer with a lot of unusual stuff, and I got a house payment. So I'm afraid I work for an automotive parts supplier who's about to bite the dust. So you can spread a little love over this way. Maybe I'll. No, I'm not. That's terrible. I shouldn't be that way. I mean,
I'm an experiencer with lots of unsecured debt.
Let me just say, I hope it all works out for everybody involved. I'm retarded. Don't pay any attention to me. I'm insane. Haven't you met me?
It's a fun show. We're allowed to do that kind of thing. But no, I mean, I think he's bought MUFON for a reason. He says everything's going to be made public, so that'd be great. So. If that's the way it is, I think that's great.
Yeah.
Because I think MUFON desperately needs funding, because I think they've been I'm going to say it so you can send all your hate mail to the Paratopia message board. That they've been a pretty antiquated monster for a while. And frankly, I mean, I'll be honest with you, as far as MUFON goes, I've seen things go into MUFON and get swallowed up for years and never be heard from again. So I've never personally trusted MUFON either. So, even though I used to give lectures to MUFON groups, I was never a member. but I don't know. I think everybody kind of needs to take the lead from somebody like Ted Phillips, who, the minute he goes through the data and he says, yeah, I think I can present this. This is not something mundane. This is something interesting. And boom, it's out to the public. No questions asked. I think that's the way pretty much every researcher needs to be, because otherwise, forget about it. It's all going to be, and it has been for years, been this ego-driven thing where it's my case and thou shalt not enter unless I give you permission, and my permission is under lock and key right now. So I don't know that it's going to be a whole lot different than what it has been, but Mr. Bigelow definitely has a way of especially with Skinwalker, we don't know anything about that. I mean, we know what happened, but what were the results of the scientific testing? What?
Yeah, I know. I read the book.
Where's the video?
By the way, it scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, ooh. I mean, but they shot video of all this stuff. I mean, this stuff is on, very nice cameras that were provided. And where is that footage? We need to see that kind of thing. And that's incredibly frustrating. So, I mean. Yeah, what do we get the majority of as hoaxes?
My first gut instinct tells me, no, this is not good. But, like I said, I'm in no position to judge anybody, so I hope it works out for all parties involved. Woohoo!
Mm-hmm. Well, I have, I guess I just have one final question, and then we'll dismiss you and talk about you behind your back.
Oh, thank you. I knew you would, you little bastard.
if you think that we're at an evolutionary crossroads, do you think it's in your lifetime? I mean, what's a ballpark estimate of time that we've got left here?
Could be, because why else would I be doing this here now if not? Although, maybe I'm just laying the groundwork for the next generation. I don't know. So
you're 50. How's your diet and health? Good?
Yes, rocking.
Okay, so
I just had my, as a matter of fact...
So how many years do you think you've got left? So we've got, let's count down to your death here. I mean,
okay, death watch!
Are we talking 30 years? What do you do yourself?
Let me tell you something.
I'm surprised he didn't ask you if you were regular or not.
And I am, as a matter of fact.
Me too, like clockwork.
Wait, am I not allowed to say you're 50 because you're a woman and we're not allowed to talk about age and all that?
No, dude, that's fine. I mean, I wear it like a badge. Woo! And I got at least another 50 in me. I'm telling you, I just had a complete physical, and the doctor's like, whoa, I wish my numbers were that good. Everything is perfect. And
okay, so we got 50 years to fuck around and get things wrong.
Well, hell yeah. I mean,
excellent.
I'd be here for a while unless I get hit by a bus in the morning on the way to work or some shit like that, or a meteor drops on me.
Maybe it's
from
game
the
off.
sky.
Maybe there's no evolutionary turn point.
Yeah, but I'm in good health. As a matter of fact, I'm alarmingly good health. And as a matter of fact, even when I just turned 50, February 17th. Met Paris Hilton. I have the same birthday. Thank you. I was first, little bitch. Anyway. I would tell everybody at work, they put it up on the scrolling woo-ha, happy birthday to me, and all that, and they're all asking me how old I was, and I told them, 50, and they're like, no, you are not. Everybody, hands down, guessed me at 36. I'm like, okay, love it. So, of course, the more weight I lose, I'm going to be having a facelift because I can put this tummy in a Spanx and I can get me a Victoria's Secret bra to hike this shit up here on my front, but I can't hide this face. So the face is getting fixed first.
You are a ridiculous character.
I am retarded. I told you that.
Oh, I guess I do have one other thing. Can we bash Jim Sparks while you're here?
No. I love Jimmy. He's retarded. I love him. I love him.
But you don't believe that he can really coach people for whatever ridiculous, absorbent amount of money, do you? For those who don't know, Jim Sparks is an
can,
abductee who claims to have an alien language that was given to him, and for X amount of dollars, he will counsel other abductees and tell them what to think. Isn't that?
Hey, you know what? If he can find other people that have the money to pay him to do it, more power to him. I say, rock on.
Can you have a little conversation with him and just ask him what the fuck he's doing?
And then tell him that I'd like to put a boot in his ass.
Okay. He's really funny, though.
He's funny, all right. Yeah, he's funny. Yeah.
Oh, I'll see what I can do, boys.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thanks. But you don't believe that, do you? You don't believe that he has these any more knowledge about anything than anyone else that would qualify him to be a counselor on this, do you?
Well, like I said before, I'm in no position to judge anybody else and what they do.
Yeah, but if you had to.
I believe if I do. I believe.
Say I weren't going to leave you alone until you did. Oh. Then what would you say?
Tell you to fuck off. Now I'm going to pee on myself. No. Anyway, no, I've had serious conversations with him in the past, and I do believe that he's had legitimate experiences. Of course, this was 15 years ago, too. But I don't, like I said, I'm not going to bash anybody else or judge anybody else's stuff. But I do believe he's had legitimate experiences. I don't know. I don't know about the other stuff. That's I don't know that much about it too. I mean, I'd have to. I wasn't. I haven't paid much attention to him in the last 15 years. So.
That's probably
good on you. Yeah.
Fair enough. You weaseled your way out of that one.
I'm a girl. What can I say?
Thanks very much, Deb, for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, boys. I have had fun. Well, I always love talking to you.
Come back and we'll have you again.
Ooh.
Yes.
Over and over and over.
I will have you again and again.
See, that's why I like him younger.
Oh, boy.
You keep looking 36 and I'll keep being 35.
Hi, this is Ted Phillips, and you're listening to Paratopia.
For esoteric research and investigation into the enigmatic. Eerie Radio is a weekly podcast that features interviews with the world's leading paranormal researchers. Download episodes of Eerie Radio from your favorite podcatcher or directly from the show website at www.eerieradio.com. Eerie Radio. Listen, learn, laugh.
So, Jeff, Deb Jordan. What's your take? I had the feeling probably even before this interview that something about her might rub you the wrong way. If only because you're not, how you say, into the whole hybrid thing and and whatever else you're not into. So, how did you take all of that? Did it play well for you in your mind? I mean, what do you think of her story?
I think that I think that she's definitely had experiences, legitimate experiences. I don't think by any means that she's making stuff up. I think that for me it comes down to and you and I have had a lot of conversations on the phone about this, about the interpretation of what someone experiences versus what is actually going on. And as far as the hybrid thing and the classic abduction scenario, I don't need to go over that for anybody listening. I just think that is that's a product of media, and I think that she agrees with me that it's a lot deeper than what what we've been kind of conditioned to believe within ufology. But I think there's another aspect to that, not just the researchers, but the interpretations of experiencers to what that means, or to what actually happens to them. So I don't necessarily think that she's not telling the truth. I think that her integration into her life is basically what we're hearing. We're not really hearing what the experiences was on a raw level. I think she describes that to a point, but then basically her interpretations of that kind of follow behind. And that's where, to me, things get cloudy. So I'm not a big subscriber to the thought that there's anything particularly special about any of us, except for the fact that some people tend to pay more attention to this stuff when it occurs than others do. Some kind of grab the tiger by the tail, and some just blow it off, because a lot of it exists on the edge of your perception. So I think whatever way you interpret it is also going to come out and into that public venue. That's why I've always kind of tried to stay like, this is what happened and that's it, and that's all I have to say about it. I mean, if I went into every feeling I had past being afraid, or I mean, for me, talking about the fractal thing a couple of shows ago was beyond the stupid. I didn't even feel like I should be talking about that. But I mean, I was pretty gratified to hear that she didn't have like, they are this, they are from here, they are doing this. I don't disagree with the evolutionary part of the discussion. I do agree that it's a wake-up call of sorts, to a greater notion of what reality means. But that's stuff that my old research partner and I were talking about a long time ago, that all of this stuff was probably a symptom of something bigger, and that it was a kind of what possibly evolution could look like to us if it were if there was something outside of this kind of nudging along. And maybe she's right in the sense that we're in that fever pitch right now where, you know, it's either change your outlook on what this all means and what you're doing, or, you know, you're just going to be stuck in this endless vicious circle of exactly what you have right now. So, I mean, that would certainly fit into something that I was talking to Bill Burns earlier, and we were talking about my Men in Black episode, and I, you know, related to him that I don't even know that I equate these people to any sort of quote-unquote government, but what if it's some other privatized group that doesn't want this new awareness to happen because it would systematically mean the end of business, or you know, corporations and our everyday lives, for that matter. I mean, what if that's what the global change is all about, is that you won't get up and go to work, you won't make money, you won't worry about money. The challenge will be inside, not how much shit you can buy and still pay your bills. That just won't matter anymore. What if that's what that is? So that kind of will fit into any mold you can try and fit it into. But going back to her accounts, it's not that I disbelieve. I absolutely believe she saw and experienced some very weird stuff. But I don't know that I necessarily agree with the interpretation of what she or how she views her change, or how it's. I believe it's definitely done something for her, because it does something for everybody in the end. But what is it? Where do you go with it? I mean, is it just as simple as talking about it? I mean, that's my big question.
I don't know. I mean, I don't get the sense that she feels special in any sort of way. I get the sense that she either it was deliberately, blatantly shared with her, or she just through the years has intuited this, evolutionary, crossroads. And has decided to, or sees it, maybe she does, sees it as her job to be proactive in making that decision, and helping people make that decision. I don't think that that's necessarily special or anything. I mean, I think that's just sort of more a conscious choice. I mean, if you're saying that you see that crossroad, well, what do we know about you? We know that you came out of retirement, so to speak. Yeah. It seems like more like what you're doing is more unconscious. It's more.
Maybe that's why I'm just not getting it. Well,
all that, but well, let me ask you: are we allowed to talk about this part where you and I have privately discussed not, feeling like you're not going to die, and like if you're with us, you're going to be okay? I don't remember if we've ever spoken about that publicly or not.
I just don't have a.
I mean, you don't attribute anything to that, but. Are we allowed to talk about it?
Yeah, sure.
All right, so that. But so the only difference would be that she has that feeling, this is going to happen in her lifetime or whatever, and if you're with her,
maybe it's the verbiage. Maybe it's the verbiage for me. I mean, maybe that's what it is. I mean, when anytime I hear, somebody say something to the effect of, the universe just told me this, and I had no choice about it. This is just the way it goes. It's just kind of like is in one ear and out the other for me. And maybe it's just the verbiage of, again, like she said, language and communication are not enough. And I completely agree with that. I completely agree with a lot of what she said. It's just, I mean, like I said, it's an interpretation. I mean, I think she's a great lady. I think she's super nice and all of that. She's a great person. And we don't have to agree on the interpretative part of it. I mean, I've just got a different.
No, I'm just wondering what the disagreement actually is. Is it just the way?
I'm not even sure. I guess maybe it's the verbiage or it's the.
It's the feeling like you can play an active role in that, or have some sort of part to play. I mean, it seems like that's the part that grates on you. Is the feeling like I can do something about this. I can be a part of this.
I guess that's probably. Yeah, I guess that could be a part of it. I think that whatever you're supposed to do, you're just going to do as far as this field goes. I mean, I got back into it when Dave Vaeni wrote me about Michael Horn, and that was what kind of kicked me off back into. I mean, I was strictly sticking to the photographic stuff. I did not want to come down this path again because I saw.
You certainly didn't want to do this show with me.
Yeah, right. I'm having a blast.
Okay.
I was strictly sticking to the photographic stuff, and my wife said to me right then and there, she's like, "You're going to get into this, and everything's going to dredge back up again for you. You're going to start. We've still got weird things happening here and there, but it's nothing like the three-ring circus that our lives used to be." And I'll say this for this show because this is how comfortable I am with our listeners. My wife and I split up for 6 months because of this stuff. I left home. I left my 5-year-old, my baby boy, without a dad for 6 months because of this. Because it overtook my life in such a profound way that I didn't feel like she got me anymore. I didn't feel that I felt just continually abused. Not in the sense that she wasn't ever supportive. It's just that, and she always was supportive. Lisa's always been super, super supportive of anything I want to do, whether it be an art direction, whether it be something in this direction with this stuff, or musically. I mean, I've joined some really shitty bands, and I've been like, this is the greatest thing ever. We're going to get signed. she'd be like, yeah, I don't think so, but if that's what you want to do, I'll, whatever it takes to make it happen for you, let's do it. And she's that kind of person. But in my mind, it was, she doesn't get me, she doesn't get it. These people I'm talking to, they get it. They get me. That's the direction I should be. I'm completely miserable in my marriage, and it was nothing further from the truth in reality. It's just when this becomes your entire obsession, nothing else seems to matter. So going back into it, I always thought it from the standpoint that it never hurts to keep tabs on the enemy, and I very much viewed this as that. And so I just said, well, I can lend my visual arts stuff to looking at video and photographic stuff. So I got hooked up with ATS, and then that's when Dave found me, and we started talking. And I've been on that show how many times, and that's how I got back into talking about my own experiences again. So it's like a whole new crowd from what it used to be. But when she talks about how it tore your life apart, believe me, I know from experience. I can't think of another time in my life more horrible and more frightening than when I was, again, out away from my wife, living on my own, in a rather large estate that was loaned to me by a family member, and I was less than 2 miles away from Paranormal Central, where I took you when you came for a visit. I mean, it was right there. And a lot of weird experiences that I've never even talked about happened at that place during that time. So, pain and hurt all around. I woke up one day and just came to my senses about it. And when I came home after my sabbatical, or whatever you want to call it, I said that's couple that with the Men in Black visit and all of that. I was just like, this is not somewhere I want to be anymore. So I get what she's talking about there, but I think that when you start talking about your impressions of what you're supposed to do, I can't. Maybe it's that I can't relate to it. Maybe because it's never been so readily apparent to me what I'm supposed to be doing. I just know that I've met very key people that I never would have met, just completely spontaneous, like you, like David, like. Who else?
Back up a second. You said me. Now, what's so great about me?
Because I think that you have, I just
wanted to hear what was great about me. I'm sorry.
Dickhead. I think that you have...
I didn't think you'd take that seriously, but go ahead. Speak of my great...
Well, no. I mean, I'll say this. I mean, I think that you have given me a larger view of the I mean, you have to realize that, when I quit this so many years ago, that I was under the definite impression that this was inherently bad, negative, toxic. And I still, to a point, believe that it is toxic in the sense of what effect it can have on certain people. But I think that you have given me a different view of the direction of looking. It's not based anymore for me on what does the government know and what does this know. It's the question of what are you perceiving, how are you perceiving it. You and David both were instrumental in this for me, in how I have to step back from this and take a completely different look at myself interacting with this stuff. And I think you've both been readily willing to listen to me talk about things that really walk kind of a line of credibility when it comes to the more attention you pay to something like this, the more that you get. I think you brought that kind of you brought a definition to that for me that is showing me again a larger side of reality that I never would have been exposed to in my circles. So that's kind of where this is all gone for me. Is like I've really latched on to that that notion of this isn't, things are not what they seem to be, which I always kind of knew, but I think you guys validating that to me was pretty helpful. I was way more into the nuts and bolts, I didn't come into the reality aspect of it until I was probably 10 years in, and getting on with that notion that there are very likely these aliens or whatever we want to call them. When I said 10 or more years ago that this is not what this appears to be, I got such a backlash. It was ridiculous. And I think that nowadays I think people are very, very much more open to alternate possibilities and more open to other theories that they would not have been, back in the mid late 80s. So
what's interesting is that I saw like Jacques Vallée, who came into this field from the outside, smartest guy in the room. Gets his ass handed to him by ufologists.
Yeah.
Whitley Strieber comes from outside, smartest guy in the room, gets his ass handed to him. John Mack, smartest guy in the room, gets his ass handed to him. It's always the same thing. It's always the guy from outside, and they all three of those guys basically have that same openness to say, this ain't cut and dry ETH. Don't know what this is. Let's remain open to the questions. Mm-hmm. And they get their asses handed to them. And I saw that growing up and reading those guys, and I thought immediately, oh, these are the ones to pay attention to. Because anytime you get your ass handed to you,
you're onto something.
Yeah, you're onto something, and and you don't have an initial, as vested interest in ufology in the same way that these people who are in it do. Then I think that fresh perspective is usually pounced on and torn apart by the monkeys inside the box.
And it is more than and I'm coming around to the idea of accepting the fact that it's not all been about selling books and protecting theories, that it's also been about that maybe these people actually think that they are reporting exactly what is going on. Maybe that's their, the reason they beat it so they beat that drum so loudly is because that is what they genuinely believe is going on. But I mean, of course, we have the charlatans and whatnot. We get that,
Well,
but
when you say that Budd Hopkins and those guys are giving the mass marketed version of it, well, she's had those experiences. So the mass marketed version of it isn't something that's completely wrong. It's just something that's completely whittled down into these one or two, events that we read about over and over and over again.
Well,
and that's why I find her interesting in bucking that and saying, yeah, no, this stuff did happen to me. The Budd Hopkins stuff happened to me, but this other stuff also happened to me, and this is more important. This is actually, that was like phase 1. That was the surface level of this crap. Here was phase 2, which was more psychic and more whatever. I find that interesting because this is the fucking poster child for that stuff.
Well, I think again we have to level in what is the perception of someone who experienced the weirdness. What did they perceive? And that's, I'm telling you, that's key to all of this stuff. If you were a fly on the wall, what would you have seen if you were there? I mean, that's a question probably we're never going to be able to answer. But that what someone relates to you, whether it's under hypnosis, which I think is fucking garbage, or not, when let's give a big for instance, if you were standing beside the road up there where I took you, would you have seen the disc? Would Lisa have been in the car with someone? What really happened? I mean, I know what I perceived, I know what I think happened, but is that really it? Knowing how easily that these things, whoever these people are, how easy it is for them to manipulate your perceptions of everything and make it not dreamlike or any less real than what we're doing right now, knowing that it is that immersive, it is that detailed. I mean, you kind of have to go with what someone perceives, but I think we still have to be somewhat critical of what we're looking at. If you say, well, if they adjust our perceptions that much, what are we ever going to get from it? Because we can't take anything at face value. I think that's true to a point, but we got to work with what we got. And somewhere along the line, we're going to see, and we've seen on this show alone, just similar threads that seem to be going throughout psychedelic experiences and other paranormal experiences that seem to connect up, that seem to have a similarity to them.
Well, let me throw this at you. Do you think that if you had seen that ball of light and it had scanned you, and it had given your dog, cancer, if it had basically given you radiation poisoning and killed your animal and killed the grass outside and all of that, do you think that you could ever have swung around to saying that this is not evil? Based on just those gross physical, tumorous conditions of the body that happened? I mean, I find that amazing, I guess I'm the only one who finds that amazing that after, you took her years to recover from physical symptoms that she's still recovering from, and she's still like, well, let's, I got some good stuff out of this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's part of the thing that used to frustrate me about people that, and maybe I wasn't getting it then, was, the vast majority of people that I met that had the experience, and they said they were so traumatized by it. I said, well, do you want it to stop or don't you? And, I have to admit, I got a 5 to 7% amount of people, I would say, just in casual talking, that would say, well, not if there's something to learn. And I would say, what are you learning by getting the piss scared out of you all the time and being so debilitated by fear that, that you're afraid to take the garbage out or go for a walk with your wife in the park at night or whatever. But you got to see the bigger picture with that, and that is that, if something is, at least this is my bigger picture from my perspective, is if this stuff scared me so horribly bad for so long, then that gave me a pretty good insight into other parts of my life that I didn't tread because I was afraid to do this or do that. And, public speaking was a big one. I was terrified of that. Well, why was I afraid? Because I was afraid I'd make an ass of myself, or I'd, say something people didn't like. And in dealing with this, hitherto unknown portion of my life, dealing with this stuff, it taught me a lot about what I was afraid of. So I mean, when she talks about growth of a person based on these experiences, I can definitely relate to that. There's not a whole lot that I am afraid of as far as, life stuff, really. It's I worry about a lot of stuff, but I'm not, a lot of things that normal people get worried about, I just don't seem to really concern me that much. It's other stuff that I worry about that most people would say, well, that's nothing. So I see the growth. I see the realization that there's more to all of this, but that doesn't seem to me like, that doesn't feel new to me. I want more. I want to know the mechanism of how something like what she relates with the ball, how does that happen? Why does that happen? What is the, George would tell you there is no why, but...
There's no why.
But...
That's a bad question, Jeffrey. Bad question to ask.
Right, I know. But I want to know more about the mechanism of how it relates to us. How do we contribute to these events that happen? What's the cycle of that? Was it true that while I wasn't paying attention to this stuff and had very little things happen, and then, in the course of getting into ridiculously deep conversations with people like Dennis McKenna and you, and then Lisa the same night, boom, something happens that night that, again, I can't explain away. I can't say, well, I must have dreamed that. It was too in your face for that. Mm-hmm. What is that? Why? Why does that happen? That's the questions for me. I mean, I get that there's a larger reality. I get that that there are probably things sitting around that we can't see, listening to every word we're saying right now.
Right, you're Whitley Strieber staring at the alien, pulling off its mask, seeing the beast underneath it, and going, "That's not it. I want to know what it is." Yeah. And it's telling you you're not going to get to know.
Well,
Except I don't believe that we're not going to get to know. I think we're going to get to the fucking bottom of some of these things. That's my feeling.
I don't. I don't think we are, but I think that the struggle to do it is part of why it is.
You're wrong. We're gonna.
Well, you're wrong. No, I think we've got a lot of things to overcome, and the biggest one is being our own perception of these things, which I think is probably the reason Deb is saying that a lot of this stuff went to like a quote-unquote psychic area, because that's more direct. That's bypassing perception of the human senses, the meat senses, and that's probably a lot more useful. I can't say. Well, I guess maybe the fractal thing some weeks ago was maybe part of that. Maybe was sort of that direction.
Why
but
did you not want to speak about that? Because you thought it was silly.
Because I thought it was ridiculous.
You didn't think it was important?
See, I'm not going to be one of those people who a psychological explanation or even a partial psychological explanation is like the Antichrist. I'm not going to be one of those people. If that's where it starts, that's fine. But I mean, all these people listening to us, I can only tell you with every fiber of me and every bit of openness and honesty that I can throw at you, and as sincere as I can be, that I have always had the definite impression that this starts in your head, but it ends up standing on the floor staring at you. And I don't even know totally what that means. But I think there is a definite, tangible, psychological aspect to this stuff that it's definitely external, but somehow it gets into your head, and the more you believe it, the more it's going to manifest on that carpet in front of you. And for that reason alone, we are an integral piece of why these things happen. So the question now is, what is the external? And that for me is the big question. I have to bypass interpretations of or other people's interpretations of like Jim Sparks. He thinks he was taught the alien. I think Jim may have had some legitimate experiences, maybe a lot, and his interpretation of those experiences is what he's talking about. And I hear that and I go, I don't think that's it. It's not my experience. I can't say for sure. And like she says, who are we to criticize anybody else's experiences? But I can at least offer that, I think Deb is being completely honest about what she's experienced. I think what she's seen is what she's seen. But again, we're just like with you, just like with me, it's being filtered through our perceptions, and then it's also being interpreted by what little minds we have to interpret that and try and convey it to someone else. So much of this transcends what language that we can use. I mean, there is to accurately describe this in words is just to be thought an idiot. And that's been a big part of it too. And I think that there's a reason for that, is because there is a level of secrecy. Forget the government secrecy. Believe me. I mean, for years I've, said, why is everyone so obsessed? Stephen Bassett is so obsessed with the government must tell us the truth. Like they know everything. And I'll say this to Stephen when we see him at the X conference. Stop lobbying the government and start trying to lobby this phenomena. Because if it wanted to be known, it'd be known. Done, over with. There's not a government on the planet that could stop it.
That's a good idea. Why has everyone done that? Well, I guess technically Greer did when he went out into the woods.
Oh, please don't say that name.
He went out into the woods with flashlights and lasers.
Right. But I mean, that's where, to me, the secret lies, is that they're the ones holding the secret. These beings are the ones that are holding all the keys, and so far we've only seen a glint of the keys that they have behind their back. I just don't. I think if you were shown the key and shown the door, it would just. I keep going back to what, about what Terrence McKenna said when he asked a being one time, how come you guys always masquerade as extraterrestrials? And they said, well, if we told people what we really are, they'd really freak out. So it's like, that's. I mean, when he said that, it's got such a ring of truth to it,
and
because
it's comical on purpose. It's got to be comical on purpose.
Exactly. It's like, yeah. I mean, because it's so much. I'm convinced that whatever it is, if we ever could articulate it, it would just mean that everybody would just stop. Whatever the world would stand still, as the movie says. So. I mean, it would be that devastating to everything that we hold as a life. I mean, that's how big I think this thing is, and that's that bigger, problem or issue that seems to be a symptom of ufology, of ghost, of the paranormal, this, that, and the other. I think that they are all symptoms of this larger reality that we can't perceive, but something is trying to go, wake the fuck up, this is not what you're supposed to be doing.
You think that our what we see of them has to kind of like square peg, square hole, it has to match what they actually are, so that, like Deb and I were talking about this privately, just about how, 20 years ago she would get laughed at, she wouldn't want to talk about this stuff publicly.
Sure.
Now there's a general consensus of what alien abductions are, at least you sort of have the image of the gray being and the doctors and all that, and so people are, won't initially laugh you out of the room, they'll decide whether they believe you or not.
Right.
But they've got the image, and so the image dictates that there must be something real about that. But if the image is wrong, because for whatever reason, if the image is wrong, and it's actually this other broader thing that Jeff and I are trying to flesh out here weekly, does it have to be right? Do we have to get it right and then have that become the mainstream meme for all of this to click, for us to be able to pull them through? Like you're saying, you visualize and then it pulls through and lands on the carpet. Is that what the magic trick is here that's going on, do you think? It's almost like a combination lock. It's like we've got the numbers, and if we just do the right combination, it'll click.
I mean, you're asking the wrong guy. I have no idea. I mean, that sounds as good as, as any. I think we're too bound up in details. I think it's, we're worried about, what was the ghost wearing, and how many windows were on the disc you saw, and that kind of stuff. We're too bound up in that kind of crap, because we're all still trying to prove that this thing is real, and we don't even know what that means. So, if you get the right combination and everything clicks, I mean, I think smaller parts of that are starting to come through science to a certain point in, like what we've talked about before, which is, the serious thing that the New Agers have glommed onto, which is the whole quantum physics thing, and they grossly misinterpret that whole thing, but like Deb said, a lot of things that they're saying are clicking into place for our stuff and what that means. And how that might apply to the paranormal in general. So, I mean, you're asking the wrong guy as far as an answer for it. I don't know what the answer is going to be. I think we'll come to it. I think eventually, I don't think there's going to be any huge revelation at any point. I think it's just going to gradually turn like a slow motion wheel, and eventually this will become something that people all know is real. It will be just a gradual seepage over years. That this will just be I know about that, and that's what it is. And then I think more people will have direct experience with this. I think, like I've said before, I think a lot of people already do, and or already have, and just don't recognize it or justify it in some other way to themselves. They explain it away to themselves. So, I mean, until we're ready to stop with, I got to get to work and I don't have time to think about that right now, I've got bills to pay. If we get away from that a little bit and just say, okay, I'll pay my bills, but then I'm going to devote some time to studying something that happened to me, and I want to know why that happened and what I experienced. I think if people would just grab a hold of that string, I think they'd be surprised where it leads them.
Mm-hmm. Something that Ted, the fuck is his name? Something that Ted Phillips said
yes.
last week that has stuck with me and is grating on me, actually, which is that in all of his years of trace cases, working on trace evidence of UFO, landings, burning treetops, whatever that is, trace cases, it's always followed by poltergeist-like activity. And that was not enough for him to question the ETH. It was like that was just something that he sort of, I get the feeling, just sort of noted and went on with. So noted. Now let's get back to trace case work.
Right.
Like that would actually, to me, be the important thing to look at. I don't know.
Well,
I think about like the abduction researchers. When they did the Roper poll, and it was all there were a lot of questions about poltergeist and ghost activity and stuff like that, and there was that little movement there to equate poltergeist activity to alien abductions, to that maybe you saw part of a thing that or remembered part of an experience and thought that it was ghosts, but then if you undergo hypnosis you'll retrieve the memory of this abduction phenomena. I mean, all of that is like, I don't know, it just seems so far-sighted or something,
Yeah.
Or is it nearsighted? Is it nearsighted or far-sighted? It's definitely sighted.
We get the point, yeah. I mean, I think it's much like when you stood up at the X conference and you asked the question, how do any of you know this is extraterrestrial? And Maccabee's answer to me was just what I've heard from ufology and just what I've heard from every other paranormal group or person or authority. It's like, well, when you start talking about extraterrestrial, that's the answer I can get my head around. So that's the one we pursue. When you start talking about dimensions and all these things, I don't know where to go with that. Well, I mean, is that really an answer? I mean, it's not an answer to me. This is why the answer to at least our question in ufology's little realm is not going to come from inside ufology. Well, that's why we're doing this show.
It's not even an answer on its own terms. I mean, what is easier to study about the extraterrestrial hypothesis than interdimensional? What aspect has revealed itself in such a way that yields itself to the ETH?
Well, I don't even think it's study as much as it is that we can understand, a culture far removed from Earth, light years away, that's thousands of years in advance of us. We can see that they may have stopped here. To them, that's a plausible theory.
I don't know why interdimensional is less plausible. I mean, if there are more dimensions, and it's just a matter of opening them up, how is that different than space travel?
Well, because a lot of that stuff is still theoretical for them. They're not versed in that kind of physics. They're not versed in that. I mean, they know astrophysics. We've got astrophysicists in this field. But when you start talking about multi-dimensional, craft or fractal beings or any of this kind of stuff, they just don't know where to go with that because it just doesn't seem like something that they can speak on with any kind of authority. Whereas if you're talking about someone like, let's use Maccabee as an example, great researcher. But when it comes to the extra-dimensional stuff, he says, I don't know where to go with that. I don't know enough about that to speak intelligently on it, I think is what he was saying. And if that's the case, then where has your extraterrestrial hypothesis led you in all the years that you've been studying it? It hasn't gotten you anywhere. It's made this phenomena no more tangibly real nor yielded any more proof than it ever has. But yet it's continued completely unabated.
But why wouldn't they study it in the way that I'm sure Maccabee has studied, for instance, ancient astronauts.
Mm-hmm.
So you're willing to move back in time, forward in time, you're willing to move into outer space, but you're not willing to just study physics?
Well,
in string theory? I mean, everything else?
What have we said about the New Agers? I mean, we hate the terminology. We hate the airy-fairy space brother stuff, and we hate all of this stuff because the terminology that they're using is somewhat right. So I think when you start talking about extra-dimensional or something that we can't even come up with right now, they're talking about presenting a theory, and that theory has to be followable. It's like you have to follow a breadcrumb. String theory is still theory. It's not something that you can hang your hat on. And when you start using that kind of terminology without really having solid facts to back it up, Stanton Friedman has Zeta Reticuli as what was shown to Betty Hill. So you can say, okay, there's Zeta Reticuli here. There could be planets around that. So you're following that thread. That's something that the public can get their head around. When you start talking about string theory and all these different things, you got to be a Michio Kaku to explain that stuff to people. I mean, Michio Kaku is the Carl Sagan of theoretical physics. He's the guy that explains this stuff to us dummies. So, I mean, that's a tough road to go down because all of it is still theoretical. So where do you go with that? Well, I mean, to me, the way you go is to try to use the best terminology that you can to explain that. And that leads us back where? To the New Age. That's where it leads you. The secret. The more you give, the more you get. And that's not a place they want to go. That's not a place where serious ufologists want to go. But unfortunately, like we've noticed, the terminology sucks, but there's an idea in there. There's something there with that airy-fairy thinking that...
Well, yeah, I mean, the airy-fairy thinking comes with, A, the interpretation, and B,
exactly.
the selfishness is really what that stuff is all about.
Yes. But there's something in there of... There's a grain of sand in that pile that speaks to something like we're talking about.
Sure,
something
yeah.
large.
There's Buddhism mixed up in there. There's Theosophy mixed up in there. There's physics mixed up. I mean, yeah, sure. There's all sorts of jumbled shit mixed up in there. It's just all for self-aggrandizement and being able to say that you're happy when you're just repressed. I mean, that to me that sums up the New Age movement.
Yeah, but
gaining self-power for dummies. It's like religion left me and I was raped. So la la la. I'm gonna put on a smile and pray to dolphins. Well, no.
Right. Right. Or make the universe your shopping basket. I mean, we both know that's complete garbage. But
Earth is a Trader Joe's, and if you just wish it,
right. But let's look at let's look at that little New Age nuance right there. It's like, yeah, there is something to thought process and manifestation of things. There's something there to that. Doesn't make the universe your shopping basket, but I've had way too many of people completely outside this field, friends of mine that don't know anything about this stuff. And I mentioned this aspect of reality, or I mentioned this focus based on, manifesting things. And people all go, that's the weirdest thing that you say that, because I saw this thing on TV about that, and it was on Oprah or something, and I just thought about, I don't know what it was, like finding a pack of cigarettes in the middle of the street, and I just thought about that. And then one day I was crossing the street, and there was a full pack of unopened cigarettes there. That kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So there's, and based on my experiences, I've seen that in action. And it's not that I'm overtly looking for it. It's almost like you have to forget that you asked for it or ignore it, and that's when it hits you.
Right. And
you've said the same thing to me. This is another thing you've given to me, is this quote-unquote enlightenment thing, and I hate that word too.
Right.
But whatever that is, I would like to experience that. And you said, well, you'll never get there if you're chasing it. You just have to say, fuck it, I'll never understand it anyway, and then it'll hit you. Well, what does that sound like? Mm-hmm. Again, we go back to that, desire, focus, thought, manifested, that kind of thing. And I've noticed that for years. When I was in high school, I noticed that kind of thing happening. But you don't talk about that. People think you're a freaking weirdo. And now this is on the basis of, The Secret and all these other kind of, What the Bleep or whatever it's called. These things are getting to be known by a lot of people. I remember when I went to look for What the Bleep, because somebody had recommended, you should watch that. That's got interesting things in it. It's a lot of crap, but there's some interesting things in there I think you'll appreciate. And I went to buy that at the mall, and I'm pretty good friends with the video store owner there. And I said to him, "Do you have this movie called this?" And he goes, "Man, I got one copy left. We can't keep that in when it shows up." So a lot of people are watching that kind of stuff, and while they won't believe it all, I think they're getting the general idea, so that when we talk about this stuff, I think people do a little bit understand, probably because they've experienced it at some point too. Like I say, everything's just in a bigger picture for me. And when it starts coming down to the individual, what am I supposed to do? What do I do? I think you're going to do what you're going to do, and, that is what you're supposed to do. I don't think there's any grand plan. I don't think there's a chalkboard in the sky. I think what you do is the goal you set for yourself, and I don't know that we're ever going to get any answers to this stuff, because there's so many hurdles to get through. But if we can at least wrap our hands around, a big ball of shit with a diamond in the middle, I'll be happy at that. So,
yeah. Well, now that you've brought us full circle and given us that great image of a diamond in the middle of shit, maybe it's time to wrap this up.
I think so.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
I didn't want to yammer on this week. Thanks a lot. Jeez.
Well, you get to go back to bed now.
I was listening to the other show from last week, and I'm like, God, will you please just shut up?
And that was just a Ted Phillips. Wait, no!
Yeah. So, anyway. I guess the last thing to say is that I have decided on the thematic for Ted Phillips's charity auction for the Marley Woods Project, and we will be putting up some sketches of that, hopefully, right after this airs, the Saturday after this Friday. So everybody will be able to see it, and then I'll take some pictures as I'm trying to put it together. Cool. And we'll go for there. I think everybody will like it.
Are you going to tell them what the thematic is, or no?
No, it's topical, though.
Oh, well, they'll find out the next day anyway. So
the day after the show, sure.
It'll be like Christmas. And we have some other potential news about it, but we don't, so I probably shouldn't say that. Right?
Yeah, we'll keep that under our hats for now. Right. But we're pulling strings, people. We're pulling strings.
Very good. All right, Jeff. Let's go back to our respective hotel rooms and catch ourselves a cat nap, eh?
Yeah, that'd be good.
We didn't break the fourth wall this week. That's fascinating.
Yeah, right.
Except for just now when we just did.